to speak a little bit of your essay. We received a few papers, and David's essay really stood out. His essay is called The Universalization of the Torah, and we would really like to hear more about it. So, David.
So I won't speak too long. I've just come from second year Greek grammar, so if I look a bit dazed and confused, that's because I am. Thank you very much. It's really an honor and a joy to have been chosen for this. I really do admire the work that you do, and I think it's very commendable. My interest in Jewish-Christian relations kind of began during my MDiv program, which I did in London, Ontario. And in New Testament classes, we would discuss the depiction of the Jews in the Gospels and other parts of the New Testament. And I never really looked at that before, it never struck me before. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And one of the events that King's College in London put on that year was what they call, it's kind of funny, but an Abrahamic road tour, where a bunch of students, Jewish, Christian, Muslim students, got on a bus, and we went to first a mosque, had a talk, free food. Then we hopped on the bus and went to the Sisters of St. Joseph convent in London, had a talk, more free food. And then we got back on the bus and we went to the Temple of Israel in London, which is the Reform synagogue, and again had a talk and of course more free food. They know how to get students out. And for me that really concretized what dialogue is, because it's not just academic, it actually has a real world, real life events. And so I've also participated in Jewish-Christian dialogue here in Toronto, the synagogue suppers. I've been to those, and my inner nerd is about to come out, but being able to watch how the Hebrew that I'm learning in class is then put into practice in a worshiping community is really quite remarkable, and it gives a new sense of meaning to what we do in the classroom, despite still being difficult. So just a brief synopsis of the essay that I wrote. It began as a paper for a class on Jewish wisdom literature, the first semester of last year. And the book that we studied was Sirach, or Ben Sira, depending on who you ask. And there was a passage in the 24th chapter where it's this wisdom hymn. Wisdom is personified as Lady Wisdom, kind of like in Proverbs, and she's praising herself. And then there's this one line partway through where it says, and this wisdom is the Torah of Moses. And that really, I don't think had been said quite like that before, especially given the context of the Greco-Roman culture and dominance and all that. I thought that was really quite striking. So I began a bit of a journey exploring what that meant and what other people thought it meant as well. So the first kind of first view that I encountered was saying, yes, they are equated. Wisdom, secular wisdom, is the same thing as Torah, but this is how Ben Sira nationalizes wisdom, meaning that if it is equal to the Torah of Moses, then only the Jews possess what is really true wisdom. And although other nations may seek it, they will not find it if they do not find it in the Torah of Moses. And another view, the opposing view, the opposite view, would be that no, actually, they are still equated in this verse, but that rather than wisdom being nationalized as something Jewish, it's actually being subsumed by worldly wisdom. In other words, making it kind of a subset of wisdom, or even philosophy, if you will, even the Greek context. So rather than the Torah judging wisdom, the Torah is judged by outside wisdom. And a third view, which I must admit I still don't quite understand, was that no, they're actually not equated, despite the verse actually saying is. But we can get into the meaning of what is, as others have done in the past. But no, they're just correlated. They're not actually equated, and it's kind of a difficult idea to get around. But the scholar who argues it uses the image of a plant, and he says that special revelation or special wisdom is the root of this plant, which cannot be seen by everybody, and general revelation or general wisdom is the part of the plant which is above the ground, which can be seen by everybody. So in this respect, there are two kinds of wisdom, but all wisdom only comes from God. That God has apportioned some wisdom. God has apportioned wisdom in two ways, generally to everybody and specifically to Israel through the Torah of Moses. And so one is not sacrificed at the expense of the other, and that's how this particular scholar believes that they're correlated. Perhaps. The view that I took towards the end of the paper was that actually I think that in this verse, the Torah, and by Torah I mean knowledge of God, the laws of God, monotheism, is being universalized, and this is one snapshot in that long process. So it is my argument that in this verse in Ben Sira, he is actually equating wisdom and Torah, but not so that one is sacrificed to the other, but that so Torah may progress, becoming more and more universalized. And I think it fits in the grander scheme of the scriptures, where we start with Adam and Eve in the garden, two people, and then we move to Noah and Abraham and Moses and David, and with each new era and covenant, more and more people are being included in the community of God. And so I argue that in this verse, in Ben Sira, that's one step along the way that continues even now. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. So I quoted, as a biblical student, of course, I would quote the text, quote the Bible, from Genesis, where God said to Abraham, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands and all the nations of the earth. All the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves through your offspring. So how then does this argument, does this relate to the greater context of why we're all here, and that is Jewish-Christian dialogue? Two reasons, two things. One is that these Jews and Christians can compare and appreciate their respective theologies regarding how wisdom is indwelt. So, for example, in Sirach, the verse that coming before the one I talked about, in verse 8, we read as part of wisdom's praise of herself, then the Creator of all things gave me a command, and my Creator chose the place for my tent. Where he said, make your dwelling in Jacob, and in Israel receive your inheritance. The Torah of God was commanded to dwell in a tent among Israel, and this parallels the prologue in the Gospel of John, which referring to Jesus, it says, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. In the Greek, and I guess I now know that because I'm taking Greek, the text literally quite means, and the Word became flesh and made a tent among us. You see the parallels of tent there, tent here. So in the context of my argument about the universalization of the Torah, different ways in which each tradition depicts wisdom indwelling in one particular people, shows how the boundaries of God's covenant are growing wider and wider in both traditions. And a second impact on Jewish-Christian relations is that it may give both Jews and Christians reason to look beyond themselves and their own distinctive traditions to see how the core message of monotheism and a compassionate and merciful God is being spread or universalized by others. I name especially the Islamic community. Jews and Christians and Muslims make up a very sizable share of the world's population, and as heirs of the promise to Abraham, we play a role in the universalizing of the message of the Torah. which continues now as it did in the days of then Sarah. So I will quote the Second Vatican Council. I really like this quotation. It states, "One is the community of all peoples, one their origin, for God made the whole human race live over the face of the earth. One also is their final goal, God. His providence, his manifestations of goodness, his saving design extend to all people, until that time when the elect will be united in the holy city, the city ablaze with the glory of God, where the nations will walk in his light." So I just want to conclude by thanking you all for coming and taking the time. I do appreciate it. I do feel quite honored to be recognized by a group that does very, very important work that I really do believe in. And I guess the only thing left to say is, go Blue Jays.